Part 5. The Little Grave. 4th day of the March, near Mullingar, County Westmeath. April 1847. The rain returned before dawn, not a violent storm, just a steady, cold drizzle that seemed determined never to end. Within minutes everyone was soaked. Blankets grew heavy, clothes clung to shivering bodies. The road became a ribbon of thick clay that pulled at every footstep. Sean adjusted the bundle on his back. It felt heavier each mile, though he knew it was because he was growing weaker. Beside him, Kathleen cradled Moira beneath her shawl. The baby had not cried since the previous evening. "She's sleeping well," little Kathleen whispered hopefully. Her mother forced a smile. Yes. But she knew better. Moira wasn't sleeping. She was fading. Her tiny hands felt cool. Her breathing had become shallow. She no longer searched for her mother's breast with the desperate hunger of an infant. When Kathleen tried to nurse her, the child barely suckled before drifting away again. Sean noticed it too. He caught his wife's eye, and neither spoke. There were no words left for fears they had already lived twice before. By mid-morning the procession slowed, not because Robinson wished it, because too many people simply could not keep the pace. The coughing was worse now. Several children burned with fever. An old man wandered aimlessly into a field before his grandson gently led him back. People were no longer merely hungry, they were exhausted beyond reason. Around noon Kathleen stumbled. Sean reached for her arm. "I'm all right." She wasn't. She pulled back her shawl. "Moira won't wake." Sean looked at the baby. The tiny face was peaceful, almost impossibly peaceful. He touched her cheek. Cold. Far colder than the spring air. He placed 2 fingers beneath her nose. Nothing. Again, nothing. He closed his eyes. Not again. Dear God, not again. Kathleen already knew. She had known for the last half-mile. She had continued walking because she could not bear to stop. Now she sank slowly to her knees in the mud. My baby. She gathered Moira tightly against her chest. My beautiful little girl. The words dissolved into sobbing, and little Kathleen looked from one parent to the other. "What's wrong with the baby?" No one answered. She stepped closer. "Ma'am?" Still nothing. She touched her sister's tiny hand. "She's cold." Sean knelt beside his wife. He wrapped both arms around her, and for several moments neither moved. The line of emigrants slowly flowed around them. Many looked. Most understood immediately. Several quietly crossed themselves. One of Robinson's horsemen rode over. "What's the delay?" Sean stood slowly. "My daughter has died." The rider looked briefly at the infant. His expression didn't change. "You'll need to move." Kathleen stared at him. "You can't mean that." "You may bury the child." Relief washed briefly across Sean's face, and then the rider continued. "You have 10 minutes. 10 minutes. 6 months of life. 10 minutes. Sean looked desperately around. There was no churchyard, no priest nearby, only a hedgerow overlooking a small field. He borrowed a spade from another emigrant. The earth was wet and heavy. Every shovelful seemed to take forever. His hands blistered. The hole remained heartbreakingly small. It was all the time allowed. Kathleen removed the blanket wrapped around Moira. It was the warmest thing they still owned. She kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'll need the blanket for your sister." The words nearly broke her. "I wish I could keep you warm." Instead, she wrapped the baby in the linen cloth that had once been part of her own wedding dress. Sean had carried it all these years without knowing why. Now he understood. The elderly priest who had walked with the procession appeared beside them. Without being asked, without ceremony, he knelt beside the tiny grave. His own eyes were wet. "In the name of the Father," his voice trembled, "and of the Son." The surrounding emigrants removed their caps. Even Robinson's horsemen waited silently. "And of the Holy Spirit. Amen." The priest looked at Sean. "There are no words that can lessen this." Sean nodded. "I know." Little Kathleen stepped forward. She held something in her hand, her rag doll, the only toy she possessed. She looked at her mother. "Can Moira have it?" Kathleen burst into tears. Sean could not speak. Their daughter placed the little doll gently beside her sister. "So she won't be lonely." Not one person standing there remained dry-eyed. The grave was filled, not properly, not beautifully, only quickly. Sean placed a single flat stone at its head. No name, no date, Just a marker, he whispered. I'm sorry I couldn't do better. The wind answered. Nothing more. A whistle echoed down the road. Robinson, time. The procession was moving. The horsemen looked towards Sean. We leave now. Kathleen refused to stand. Sean knelt beside her. We have to go. I can't. You must. I've left 3 children in Ireland. Sean closed his eyes. Michael, Bridget, now Moira. 3 graves, none of them together. He helped her gently to her feet. She looked back until the little mound disappeared behind the hedgerow, and then she looked back again, and again, until there was nothing left to see. Little Kathleen slipped her hand into her mother's. Ma'am? Yes. When we get to Canada, Kathleen forced herself to answer yes. Will Moira find us there? Kathleen stopped walking for just a heartbeat. Then she bent down and kissed her daughter's forehead. I think, she whispered through tears, she'll already be home. The line stretched onward beneath the grey Irish sky. 38 people would die before the march ended. One more small grave now rested beside the road, unnamed, almost certain to be forgotten by history, and never by those who had walked away from it. Now only one remained to make the journey to the sea. Part 6. The River of Tears. 5th day of March, County Meath, April 1847. No one spoke of Moira the next morning, not because she'd been forgotten, because the wound was too fresh to touch. Kathleen woke before first light, and for one brief, cruel moment, she reached instinctively for the place where her baby had always slept against her chest. Her hands found only the folds of her shawl. She held the empty cloth tightly against herself and quietly wept. Sean pretended not to notice. It was the only kindness he could offer. The procession moved east once more. The line now stretched for nearly a mile. Those at the front could no longer see those at the rear. From a nearby hill it must have looked like a slow-moving river winding through the Irish countryside. A river made not of water, but of grief. Little Kathleen walked now instead of riding on her father's shoulders. Sean no longer had the strength to carry her for long. Every few minutes she stumbled. Every few minutes she stood again. She never complained. She had seen too much to complain. Instead, she watched her mother. She knew something inside Kathleen had changed. The smiles were gone. The humming while she walked had stopped. Even her voice sounded different, quieter, as though part of it had been buried beside the road with Moira. Around midday, the march entered a prosperous market town. Shop windows displayed bread, cheese, salted beef, fresh vegetables. People crowded the streets, buying and selling as though famine belonged to another country. Many stopped to stare. Some removed their hats, others turned away, unable to look. A baker stood in his doorway, holding a warm loaf. Sean could smell it from 20 yards away. The scent almost made him dizzy, and for a moment he imagined simply walking inside, paying for bread, sitting beside a fire, eating until the ache disappeared from his stomach. Then he remembered there was no money left. Even if there had been, Robinson would never have allowed them to stop. The dream lasted only seconds. A little boy from the town ran toward the march. He couldn't have been older than 7. He carried 2 apples. Without a word, he handed one to little Kathleen. The other he gave to another child in the line. His mother came running behind him. I'm so sorry, she called to Sean. I only had the 2. Sean looked at the apple resting in his daughter's hands. It was the first fresh fruit she had seen in years. He smiled gently. You've given her more than you know. The woman wiped tears from her eyes. As she turned away, her son looked back one last time. He couldn't understand why so many children looked thinner than his little sister. Perhaps one day he would. Little Kathleen held the apple carefully. She didn't bite it. Sean noticed. Aren't you hungry? She nodded. Very. Then eat. She shook her head. I want Ma'am to have some. Kathleen smiled sadly. No, love. You need it. But you're hungry too. Sean looked away. Children were not supposed to make sacrifices for parents. Not at 5 years old. Finally, Kathleen cut the apple into 3 tiny pieces with the edge of Sean's pocket knife. 1 piece for little Kathleen, 1 for herself, and 1 for Sean. Each bite disappeared almost instantly. Yet for a few moments they remembered what sweetness tasted like. Late in the afternoon, they crossed a stone bridge over the River Boyne. Sean paused long enough to look down. The water flowed steadily eastward, unconcerned by famine, unconcerned by landlords, unconcerned by emigration. Kathleen stopped beside him. "What are you thinking?" "That this river has seen everything. The wars, the kings, the harvests, the famine." He looked downstream, and tomorrow it will still be flowing. She slipped her hand into his. "We have to keep flowing too." Near sunset, an argument broke out further ahead. A young man had left the line, only a few yards, only to gather dandelion leaves from a ditch. One of Robinson's guards rode after him. "You were told not to leave the procession." "I was finding food." "You were leaving." "My wife hasn't eaten." The guard raised his riding crop. Before it fell, the elderly priest stepped between them. He sought weeds, not freedom. The horseman glared. For several moments neither man moved, and finally the guard lowered his arm. "Keep moving." The young man returned carrying only a handful of bitter leaves. His wife thanked him as though he had brought home a feast. That evening, as families settled once again beneath the open sky, the priest moved quietly among them. He stopped beside Sean. "How is your wife?" Sean looked towards Kathleen. She sat holding the tiny linen cap that had belonged to Moira. She stared at it without blinking. "I don't know." The priest nodded slowly. "Grief walks beside us all." He reached into his coat and withdrew something wrapped in cloth, a small wooden rosary. "The beads belonged to my mother." Sean tried to refuse. "I cannot take." "You aren't taking them." The priest closed Sean's hand around them. "You're carrying them for a while." Sean looked down at the worn wood, polished smooth by decades of prayer. "I'll return them. If we both reach Canada." The words lingered between them. If. Not when, if. That night the sky finally cleared. Hundreds of stars filled the darkness. Little Kathleen lay with her head resting against her father's arm. "Daddy?" "Yes." "Can people in heaven see the stars?" "I think so." "Do you think Michael and Bridget can see us?" "I hope they can." "And Moira?" Sean looked upwards. "I don't think she's frightened any more." Little Kathleen was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "I'll wave anyway." She lifted her tiny hand towards the heavens, slowly, carefully, as though afraid her baby sister might somehow miss it. Sean watched the little hand moving beneath the stars. He had no words, only tears he hoped his daughter would never see. Far ahead, the lights of Dublin were still days away. Behind them lay hundreds of miles of memories. The road continued east, and with every step Ireland slipped a little further behind them.